Hi everyone, welcome to Skyrocket Your Business. I'm Helen Burton and I'm the host for the show. I want to remind you about our friend Socrates, who's going to give us wisdom. And also, whenever you want some advice, just pick up my book, Skyrocket Your Business in 30 Days while having coffee with Helen. And make sure you have that cup of coffee. It's September. The kids going back to school. And I always feel this is a new time of year. So what I do is sit down in front of my computer and I make a list of things I've accomplished since January. And then I read it over a couple of times and I acknowledge myself for what I've done and I celebrate. So I make a suggestion that you sit in front of your computer with either a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and write down all the things that you've accomplished. And it can be very tiny or it can be very, very large. And then celebrate what you've done. So we have a very special guest with us today, Linda Meisel, who is a licensed clinical social worker and has been the executive director of Jewish Family and Children's Services of Greater Mercer County for the past 17 years. That's been a while.
It's been a while.
So, Linda, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you, Helen, for having me on the show. I really appreciate this opportunity to chat with you. I've lived in Princeton for the past 40 years.
Okay.
I'm married. I have 3 grown children who are also married.
Okay.
And I have 8 grandchildren between the ages of 10 and 15 months.
Oh boy.
So that's just, and as you said, I've been at Jewish Family and Children's Service for the past 17 years, and for the 10 years prior to that, I was the executive director of Corner House here in Princeton.
Oh, all right. Okay. So you've been, working with families for quite a while.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's a passion of mine, so I'm really feel so grateful that I've had these opportunities.
Oh, that's fantastic. So please give us a short history lesson about the Jewish Family and Children's Services.
Well, our agency was started in the 1930s in a response to the Depression and how families were really struggling.
Right.
The first thing I want to say about Jewish Family and Children's Service is that we are open to all. You don't have to be Jewish to use the services at Jewish Family and Children's Service, but we use Jewish values, the lens of Jewish values, in our work. So we are very compassionate and caring, and our staff are extremely well trained. Everyone is a licensed social worker or a licensed clinical social worker in our counseling team. But since the 1930s, we've been helping families in many different ways. Seniors, young families, we have a therapy department, we have a food pantry. So we really have a lot of different services.
Yeah, so that's really great that you're able to help people in need,
And that's our goal, and we work really hard to make sure that families can access our services and to help them really do what they need to do to continue stability for their family, because we're all about family. That's really what it is, the heart of our agency.
Right, and that's so very important. And I understand you're having a new program, and it's the Grandparent Support Group. And I'm a grandparent too, so why don't you tell us your vision for the program?
Well, this grandparent support group was actually the brainchild of a woman named Carol Horowitz, who's a longtime Princeton resident as well, and a grandmother, and a licensed clinical social worker who had many years of experience working with young children. Our vision is to offer grandparents an opportunity to come together and talk about their experience, not only as grandparents, but in addressing the issues of grandparenting around their adult children. Because we all had a way in which we raised our children.
Right.
But there's, of course, been a flood of new books out there
Yes.
telling this next generation all
Exactly.
the things that they need to do to raise their children.
Right.
And now, of course, in the electronic age, there's mommy blogs and all kinds of internet resources for families to get ideas about how to raise their children. And those
Right.
ideas are different than the ways that we raised our children. So part of the support group is to help grandparents learn together
Right.
about what are some of the new ways, so we can be as up to date as possible. You know,
Right.
this is now a digital age.
Yes.
Most of us were not parenting in a digital age. And also to learn from one another
Right.
techniques of being a good grandparent. Some people grandparent from a distance.
Right.
Some people are hands-on. How to build a separate and individual relationship with your grandparents, separate and
Right.
apart from their parents. How to navigate appropriate boundaries. How to approach different parenting styles. If you have
Right.
3 children, they may each have a very different parenting style. You
Oh,
go to
definitely.
visit, you have to quickly change yourself into
Right.
the parenting style of that family. I
Right.
had one grandmother tell me the other day of her dilemmas around food. So she has
Right.
one set of children and their grandchildren who are vegetarian, extremely health conscious
Yes.
around food, and then another family that's quite the opposite. And
Yeah.
you know, if everyone is all out together, what an experience that is.
Right. Exactly.
And so it's really how we as the grandparents navigate that, how we address our feelings, how we help ourselves figure out the best way to approach each different family.
And that's so important. I know with my friends that we always say, bite your tongue.
Yes, well, that was one of,
Bite your tongue.
we call this grandparenting through uncharted waters.
Yeah.
But bite your tongue was the sub name that we had thought of, but we
Right.
realized that we didn't want to put that out there
Right.
to the community. But yes, I mean, these are uncharted waters in the sense that there's no roadmap for this generation of grandparenting.
Right.
Because it's different than previous generations. When I think about how my parents were wonderful grandparents to my children, but it was very different in terms of what was expected, in
Right.
terms of being a grandparent versus being a grandchild. Again, the whole social media, the whole digital
Right.
world. Nobody was texting their grandchildren. Nobody was FaceTiming their
Exactly.
grandchildren. It's just a totally different way of being.
Oh, it definitely is. And it's, I know that with my grandchildren, they're older. And I remember when my older grandchildren used to come over for a weekend, my daughter used to say, oh, it'd take me a week to get them back to normal. And then they're back again, you know, because our rule was you can do whatever you want as long as you don't get hurt, you know.
Right. Well, and I think that's part of what we're talking about here, in the sense that grandparents have different rules for their home
Right.
than perhaps the children have at their parents' home. Whatever they are, both are fine.
Right.
They're just different. One of my things is that when my grandchildren come, we have made up rules together. Even when they were very little and
Right.
they couldn't read, they stood around me while I typed them into the computer. You know,
Right.
they told me what the rules were. You know, no hitting, or just the,
Right.
you know, no teasing, all
Right.
those kinds of things. And I would print them up and I would put them on their bed. So when they arrived each time for a visit, they
Right.
remembered what the rules are.
Right.
And I'm sure they have rules at their parents' house,
Right.
but it's just different. And of
Right.
course, you're not with them every day. They're only
Right.
coming to visit for a weekend, which is
Right.
quite different than having them every day.
Every day. Oh, it definitely is. And I remember my grandfather. Like I really loved him. And when I was little, and I remember this, we would get into bed together, and he'd tell me a story, and I was the heroine, and then he would fall asleep, so I had to wake him up to find out what happened. So I had a very close relationship with my grandfather, and I think I have that with my grandchildren, which I think is important.
Well, I think one of the things that grandparents bring to the table for grandchildren is that unconditional love.
Yes.
And the opportunity for someone to really dote on you in a
Right.
way that a grandparent does, because again, they're not taking care of you day in and day out.
Right.
And they are, every time you're with them is a special, unique experience. And so for a child to, talking now as someone who works with families, for a child to have that special love, that special
Right.
other person besides their parents in their lives,
Right.
that is really a treasure. And
Yes.
that's what we as grandparents can give our grandchildren,
Right.
is that affection and that time, also
Right.
the time.
Exactly. It's really true. What is your goal for the program?
Well, our goal is for grandparents to have an opportunity to talk together, to learn, to talk about building positive relationships with our grandchildren, and also positive relationships with their parents, to talk about how to manage the different parenting styles,
Right.
to also figure out ways, if you have multiple grandchildren, how to have a unique relationship with each of them.
Right.
Again, part of it has to do with their age and their interests, but
Right.
to really hone in on what an individual, one size doesn't fit all.
Right,
Each
exactly.
grandchild has a different interest, and
Right.
for you to be able to figure out what are activities that you can do with that particular grandchild
Right.
that really connects with them, so you make
Right.
that strong connection. And then just learning some, again, how to deal with grandchildren in the digital age, how to use FaceTime
Right.
well. Some of, when I've talked to younger families, they say, well, when my parents do FaceTime, then everybody wants to be talking to grandma, and
Right.
what ensues is a fight among the children
Right.
over who's going to be on the screen. So how do you do that?
Correct.
How do you navigate it so you get to talk to the grandchildren,
Right.
and at the same time the mom doesn't have to deal with one child pushing the other off the screen?
Right. It's very true. That reminds me, I took a workshop, and we were talking about compromising. And they were talking about baking a cake and with your children, and to have each child do something different, and to, make the child feel good. So my grandchildren came over, and I said, oh, we're going to make a cake. So I said, but we're going to do it that, JJ, he puts all the ingredients in. And Caitlin, you'll stir it. And Caitlin said, oh no, I want to put the ingredients in. And Jay said, oh no, I want to do it. So I said, well, we're not getting a cake.
Right.
So we'll go out and buy a cake. You know what I mean? So it's
Absolutely. And so you need to figure out what are the activities that work together,
exactly
and what are some things that you do alone with them.
Right.
And to have some, special one-on-one time. Even creating a tradition that is special for their birthday,
Right.
or a holiday. Those are what memories are about.
Oh,
And
exactly.
and I think one of the things that we're also talking about in this grandparenting group is creating. How do you create really positive memories with your grandchildren?
And that's so important. Like I said, I was very close to my grandfather, so I remember the times, and I remember the times with my grandchildren. So it's important.
Absolutely,
Yes,
it really
right.
is important.
What are some of the suggested topics you'll be covering? I know you talked about some of them.
Well, look, I think setting limits. There are again all these different parenting books out there on the new way of communicating with your children and discipline and setting limits. What do you do as a grandparent that may be different than their parents do, and how you sort of manage that difference. Relationships with extended family. If you have more than one child, how do you manage times when everyone is together? Because if everybody has a different parenting style, it can be a little bit hairy in terms of how all the interaction goes. And you want your siblings to be supportive. You want your own children to support their siblings. How your grandchildren as siblings get along. Your cake story is perfect because clearly everybody wanted to do the first activity. So how do you manage if you are having a weekend visit from more than one grandchild? How do you manage that in a way that everybody feels like they're having their own time and they're being special? Bedtime. Again, some of our adult children have great bedtime routines, and everybody follows the routine, and everybody goes to bed. And then you have happy wanderers who, there isn't such a routine at home. They come to visit grandma, and it's 9, 10 o'clock at night, and they're 4 years old, and they're saying, "One more cup of water." I forgot to tell you something, and they're not going to sleep. Money. Again, if you have multiple children, they're all in different financial positions. And how the family handles money, talks about money, relates about money, and how you as the grandparents do that is very different. And then, of course, each of us is only one half of the grandparent family. There's a whole nother set of grandparents, hopefully, that children interact with. Grandma and grandpa may be very different than Nana and Papa. And so you're asking children to accommodate to many different family styles, which is all healthy because children should learn to be flexible. But you also have to be aware of how that navigation takes place.
No, it's very true, and it's and also like you were talking about, which I think is true. Like, my daughter raises my grandson one way, and my other daughter raises her children a different way, and so when we all get together, it's it's supporting each other, which is so important.
It also speaks to the fact that there have to be some overriding values in your family dynamics. And the value of supporting family needs to override, I think my children have better eating habits than your children.
Exactly. And it, also, I found that when I was a very young grandmother, and my husband and I, we ran around a lot with the kids and everything. And their other grandparents were older, and they couldn't do the same things. So it was like we had to step back a little, too. And, we did what we did, and, when they went over to their other grandparents' house, they had a good time, too.
I think it's really important to value, and that I think will be a conversation in this group as well, to value your children's other grandparents. Because I think that, again, we each bring something unique to the table. And but the thing that's common is that we all love these children.
Oh, yes.
And honestly, for me, there's no one else who likes to hear about stories about my grandchildren as much as their other grandparents.
I know.
So when I have them visiting for a weekend and they've done something particularly cute or smart, it is always their other grandmother that I send an email to because she agrees with me. They are
Right.
cute. They are
Right.
smart.
Exactly.
You know, my friends, they sort of shake their heads.
Right,
But there are
exactly.
other grandparents who truly love them.
I know.
And yes, it may be different at their house, but it's fine.
Right. No, it's really true. Um, Please tell us where and when the group is going to start, and if there's going to be a charge.
Yes, so the group is going to start on October 13th, and
Oh, it's
Carol
on.
Horowitz which is a Tuesday, and Carol Horowitz is going to co-lead the group with Beverly Mishkin, who is the Director of Senior Services at Jewish Family and Children's Service.
Okay.
There's a $36 charge, and it will be meeting at Jewish Family and Children's Service, which is located on Alexander Road,
Right.
right in Princeton Junction. And to register for the group, they either need to call Beverly
Okay.
at 609-987-8100
Oh.
or email her
Okay.
at bmishkin@jfcsonline.org. With a long email name like that, it might just be easier to give a call.
Okay. We're used to giving calls. I understand, you're a proud grandmother, and I've been listening to you. Can you tell us any special stories that,
Well, you know what? I asked my 8-year-old granddaughter,
Right.
What are some of my precious moments?
Yes.
And she said to me, well, I think I would tell them about how it's really important when we have holidays together. And when we have sleepovers. They really
Okay.
like sleepovers. Because again, I think when you go for the afternoon, it's lovely, but it's not the same thing as having a sleepover. I think sleeping over at Grandma and Grandpa's is very special.
Exactly.
And it has a side benefit too, and that is that if you're staying at Grandma and Grandpa's, Mom and Dad have some time alone,
Yes.
which is a very nice side benefit for them.
Right. Exactly.
And then the other thing that she said is story time.
Okay.
That reading stories before bed or having special
Yeah,
stories that we love to read together
Right.
is really important.
Right. Yeah.
And I would think that the last thing she noted was one-on-one time, which of course
Okay.
is the hardest to
Yes.
do. To try to figure out a time when you are only with one grandchild, their siblings are not there.
Right.
So what we've just recently started doing as they've gotten older is the day when it's your birthday,
Right.
we do something special alone with you.
Oh, okay.
Your
All right.
siblings
Like-
aren't invited
Right.
to come along.
Right.
It's just your day.
Right.
So it can focus on your interests. And as an example, last year when my grandson turned 9, he's a big sports fan.
Yeah.
And he loves the Knicks. And
Okay.
so we took him for lunch. Our visits always tend to involve some sort of food.
Yes.
And then we took him to a behind-the-scenes tour of Madison Square Garden.
Oh my goodness.
So he got to see the locker room and
yes.
all of that.
Right.
And that fits into his, his interest
that's
in
right,
sports.
right.
For my granddaughter, I took her to lunch at the American Girl doll.
Oh,
place
okay. Yeah.
Because she's very into the dolls and all of the sort of fashion that the dolls have,
Yeah.
and so that was something special for her.
Right.
And I think the hard thing is to sometimes figure out what is exactly special to each individual
right.
child, but once you do it, to
Right.
really build on that in terms of individual types of experiences.
Right. Yeah. No, it's so important. I do one-on-ones. Like when it's their birthday, around that time, and when they're home from college, we always go into New York and we see a Broadway show.
I love that idea, and I'm planning to copy it.
Okay. And we stand online. We get the 2 first, and we go out for lunch. So it's a whole big day. And And with my one grandson who lives near me, since he's been 2, I pick him up on Mondays from school. And that was our special time. And now since he's in high school, it's not as easy. But like the other day, he said to me, "What's going to be our special day?" I said, "Well, we'll see your schedule, you know." He said, "Well, we have to do it, Grandma." I said, "Jeffrey, I wouldn't forget it. You know, of course we'll do it." So
right,
that's
and,
great.
and you're also pointing out something that I think will probably be part of the conversation in the group, and that is, as children get older, their lives get more complicated. They
Yes.
get really busy with lots of peer activities, and whether they're a sports kid or the drama kid, or
Right.
they, they take music lessons. There's just lots of different things going on. Plus, of course, the homework load is really different.
Oh, yes.
And so it's important to begin early to develop a relationship and do special things because, again, you're building memories and you're
Right.
making the connection, and which will carry over so that when they're in high school and you perhaps can't see them weekly, but you
Right.
see them every other week or you see them once a month, or for those grandparents who are grandparenting at a distance where they may
Right.
only see their grandchildren 2 or 3 times a year,
Right.
you really have to think through, how am I going to spend that time?
Exactly. And we're almost running out of time, so let's be a little short. What are some of the other programs you have?
Well, at Jewish Family and Children's Service, we have a counseling program with professional therapists, licensed clinical social workers.
Right.
And, people come for depression, anxiety, family relationships. Again, we have grandparents who come because they're in a very conflictual relationship with their adult children.
Right.
We have some grandparents who haven't been allowed to see their grandchildren, for example,
Yes.
which is quite sad. We also have a lot of senior services. We have a signature program called Secure at Home, where we support seniors living in their homes as long as they can with a 24/7 hotline. So those are just 2 of the programs I think that are would be of interest to your listeners.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's very good. At least, there's a place that they can go and feel comfortable talking about it, because that's the most important thing.
Right. It's
You
a
know,
safe space for that.
Right, yeah. If somebody would like to volunteer their time, are you looking for any volunteers?
Well, we have lots of volunteer opportunities. We have a food pantry, so volunteers go to shop and stock for our pantry. We have we deliver Meals on Wheels, so we always need drivers. We have people who do friendly visits to seniors or small errands for them if they're homebound, like picking up milk or something like that.
Right.
And the person in charge of our volunteers is a woman named Lisa Adler.
Okay.
And she, again, can also be reached at 609-987-8100.
All right, thank you. So this has been very, very informative.
Thank you again.
And it's so tell us again how people can get in touch with you. If they need your services, if they'd like to volunteer or donate financially.
So we have a website, www.jfcsonline.org. Our whole story is on that website, including a very large Donate Now button. And volunteer opportunities are listed as well.
Right.
And they certainly can always call 609-987-8100 and ask for Lisa if they're interested in volunteering, Beverly if they're interested in the grandparenting group, and if they just have a question, they can feel free to ask for me, Linda Meisel.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us today.